What's wrong with the OnePlus 11? No, seriously, it sells for $699, significantly less than a lot of other flagships, has the latest Snapdragon, decent cameras, and stupidly fast charging. Yet at the same time, the reaction to this phone from the traditional OnePlus fanbase has been kind of meh. So let's take a look at how OnePlus got here and whether the new OnePlus 11 is a better phone than a lot of folks are giving it credit for. I'm Alex Dobie, this is XDA TV, let's get into it. The OnePlus 11 is a bit of a misunderstood phone, and I think what a lot of people are misunderstanding about it comes down to prior expectations. OnePlus started out as this pluggy outsider brand that would give you the latest high-end specs for less than everyone else. Sure, you might not get the very best camera, and the design was a bit derivative, but it was very clear what you were getting with a OnePlus phone. A little ironic given the never settle tagline, but everyone understood the bargain you were making when you bought OnePlus. Then in 2019, they pivoted pretty hard with the OnePlus 7 Pro. This is still a fan favorite device today, and it marked the point where OnePlus really started to compete seriously with the big boys in terms of imaging and design. And it did so while still pricing its phones pretty aggressively and having a near stock Android software experience that its fans really loved. For the past 4 years now, OnePlus has been following a very similar playbook, and we've expected the OnePlus Pro device to be one that was able to closely compete with the likes of Samsung. This year though, things are different. The base model of the OnePlus 11 is priced $200 cheaper than the 10 Pro was in 2022. So the message seems to be that OnePlus is going back to its roots and doesn't really need a Pro or Max or Ultra. The 11 is the one flagship for 2023, and it's priced a tier below the past few years' OnePlus flagships. Yet because of this, the generational jump from the OnePlus 10 Pro to the OnePlus 11 is a bit of a weird one. It's one of those situations where the newer device definitely has changes that you could categorize as downgrades. The IP rating has fallen from IP68 to IP64, so it's slightly less protected against water and dust. The telephoto capabilities have taken a hit as well, with a 3.3 times optically stabilized camera from the 10 Pro being ditched in favor of a 32 megapixel portrait lens with a 2 times zoom distance that lacks OIS. And the big one for me personally is the removal of wireless charging, the single worst decision in this phone in my opinion, coming just 2 years after OnePlus introduced its own flavor of fast wireless charging in the 9 series. But you've got to remember this phone cost $200 less at launch than last year's did, and you've got to expect that'll be reflected in the hardware that you get. Where the OnePlus 11 sets itself apart is in the performance it delivers for its price. This is a Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 device that costs $699 for the base model. I've been using the upgraded variant that costs $799 and comes with 16 gigs of RAM and 256 gigs of storage. That's laptop level memory and total overkill for a phone in 2023, but it is also a nice bonus for anyone opting for more storage to also get double the RAM. The OnePlus 11 is flawlessly fast, just as we come to expect from the brand. And while the software appearance may have changed, and we'll get to that later, the smoothness of the experience and the gaming potential you get out of Qualcomm's latest chip, paired with OnePlus's vapor chamber cooling system, is formidable. This phone absolutely screams. And there's a lot else that I actually really like about the OnePlus 11. The size and weight is just fine for me as someone who likes larger phones. It doesn't have the same heft and occasional in-hand awkwardness that the iPhone Pro Max or Samsung Ultra devices sometimes have, but it still delivers a 6.7-inch display that's big enough for anything you're likely to be doing on a smartphone. The screen doesn't boast as high a peak brightness level as some of the latest Samsung phones, just 1300 nits versus 1750 in the S23 series, but 1300 is still pretty bright, and I found it more than bright enough for easy outdoor visibility even in direct sunlight. That said, I do wish OnePlus's auto brightness was a bit more aggressive. Even in indoor environments, it often didn't ramp up quickly enough for my liking. I'm not crazy about the design of this phone. It looks fine, it's fairly unremarkable, even with the giant camera bulge on the back that sort of evokes the memory of the good old Nokia Lumia 1020. It's fine, but it's not going to turn any heads. Speaking of that Lumia 1020, let's talk cameras. I already mentioned the change to the telephoto that makes the OnePlus 11 noticeably worse at long distance shots than the 10 Pro, especially at night. That's a shame and makes it feel less versatile as an overall camera package. The main sensor is also smaller than last year's, but that's not a difference you really notice. Even in side-by-side night shots, it was kind of a tie between the OnePlus 10 Pro and the OnePlus 11. The biggest loss for my money is the OnePlus 10 Pro's really fun 150-degree fisheye shooting mode that let you capture some really dramatic shots. That's replaced with the more traditional ultra-wide shooter. But overall, I found this camera to be perfectly satisfactory. The AI shooting mode has a tendency to overcook some shots just a little bit, but it's easy to turn off. And with it turned on, it's able to pull out pleasing color details in scenes like sunsets and food shots. Refocusing that tertiary camera towards being more of a portrait lens kind of makes sense in its own way. The OnePlus 11 takes some pretty fantastic portraits, either at 1x or 2x, emulating the look of two classic Hasselblad lenses, and I was also impressed with the edge detection in portrait shots like this. Again, this is a $699 phone, and it's relatively rare to get a telephoto that's any good at this price point. It feels like a cop-out to say this is a good camera for the price, but that's the only real way to frame it. It's fine, nothing more, nothing less. I've complained enough about wireless charging already, but despite the loss of this feature, it's replaced by something that's actually kind of game-changing. 100-watt wired charging, or 80 watts in the US, is something you don't generally see in the West, and having it kind of completely changes the way you think about charging your device. When you can put the phone on its charger and take the time to make and drink a cup of coffee in the morning, and you know when you get back to it you'll have enough for a full day's use, that's pretty huge. In fact, in my testing, a fully depleted OnePlus 11 made it all the way back to 100% in just 26 minutes. Remember the old OnePlus Dash Charge slogan used to be a day's power in half an hour? Well, now we're under that half-hour charging time and getting a full charge that's good for 2 days of use. I think this will be true of most Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 phones with a battery of this size, but getting 7 hours of screen on time out of this thing in a 24-hour period is very much possible. That's pretty much unprecedented in the Android world. We talked about fans' expectations for this phone a little earlier, but what I didn't mention was the software, because that's something else that's been changing over the past few years. As OnePlus has evolved into just another big phone brand, its software came to more closely resemble ColorOS, the UI used by its parent company Oppo. First just small changes, but now they're basically one and the same. Yet as much as the hardware priorities and price are similar to what they were 4 or 5 years ago, the software makes it feel like just another Oppo phone. It's not the OnePlus experience that fans remember. We've got a full video on exactly what happened with OxygenOS over the years, so check that out for the full story. Now, I'll freely admit that I've been a bit down on OxygenOS over the past few years. The software situation has been just a little bit chaotic, and it seemed like the brand had neither the nerd cred of the Google Pixel nor the mainstream appeal of a Samsung Galaxy. It's stuck somewhere in the middle. OnePlus started out as an underdog enthusiast brand before pivoting towards directly competing with traditional expensive flagships. With the OnePlus 11, that's being walked back somewhat, and I think the device as a whole makes more sense if you think of it more as a successor to the OnePlus 10T than the 10 Pro. And with OnePlus having been fully reabsorbed into Oppo as a sub-brand, maybe it makes sense that the OnePlus and Oppo flagships aren't directly competing with each other anymore. Based on the leaks, we're expecting the Oppo Find X6 Pro to pack a pretty amazing camera setup. Obviously that's quite different to what you find in the OnePlus 11. The problem for this phone is that OnePlus lost the nerds with the move to ColorOS and was never really able to capture the mainstream with phones like the OnePlus 9 and 10 series. The OnePlus 11 is a great phone that I can 100% recommend, but is it going to be able to capture the magic of those classic never settle flagship killer devices like the 3, 5, 6 and 7? I'm not so sure. So let me know what you think of the OnePlus 11 down in the comments, and be sure to check out our comparison video versus the Pixel 7 Pro if you haven't already. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.